All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to session 2 of Increase Your Net Worth. So I want to dive in today, and I'm excited to share some info and get going. If you have comments, drop them in. Of course, if you're watching on Facebook and you want to watch on StreamYard, click the links that were texted out. We apologize. We sent the wrong link first, but the second link that was texted is the correct one. So feel free to click. Join us. Christy, good morning. Lisa, good morning. Leo, good morning. Let's dive in. So let's talk a little bit about our wealth creation plan. So I'm a firm believer that no matter your financial situation, no matter where you're at currently, whether you're completely happy, content, satisfied with where you're at, or you're looking to increase your wealth, or you're in a place where things are really bad, you have the opportunity to create wealth and become very wealthy. There are countless stories, in regardless of your age. There are countless stories of people who have amassed massive amounts of fortune in the later part of their life. Sam Walton, the Colonel Sanders, right? The list goes on and on and on and on. So the point here, though, is that everyone has the ability to be very, very wealthy, but there's a reason there's a top 1%, and then there's a bottom 99%. And a lot of that has to do with not because we don't have access or resources or we don't have things that super wealthy people have. It's that we aren't utilizing the tools that are available. We aren't taking the time to learn about the tools that are available. And then we're not putting a plan in place to take advantage of the things that we're going to talk about today. And so what do I mean by that? You often hear people say the rich get richer. Well, if you think about it from a mentality standpoint, right, it is true. Wealthy people get wealthier. They use their money to their advantage to compound and grow and create more wealth. But think about the three types of people. You have people that are basically like living hand to mouth, right? Barely getting by. They're just the money that comes in that they make. There is nothing left over after all of the expenses are there. They're living hand to mouth. Those people are in a bad spot, and they need to figure out how to go create income and increase income. But then we get the people that are kind of the middle class. And what the middle class does is they create earned income. They buy things with that earned income that they think are assets, but they're really liabilities, like a personal home. I'm all for having a personal home. I think we need a nice place to live, and it's part of the American dream. Nothing wrong with having a personal home, and it is considered somewhat of a liability because that's something I'm paying on every single month, and it's not generating me a cash on cash return. It's costing me money to be in that house. Now, over time, we're going to pay that house off. And then again, we still have expenses on it because taxes don't go away. Insurance doesn't go away. Utility costs, things like that. But that is an expense. So middle class buy things, liabilities. They take their earned income, they buy liabilities, and then they spend what's left over or invest what's left over. And typically it's not a lot. And then you've got the wealthy. And what the wealthy do is they take their earned income, they buy assets, and then they use the income they're generating from those assets to buy things like homes and boats and cars and things of that nature. So it's just a little bit of a mindset shift. But let's look at our wealth creation. We have to create income. We have to then tax plan and put a plan around how we're going to offset income tax, how we're going to take the money we're making and save it. We're going to increase our income then. We're then wanting to save that money in our increased income, not go spend it. Then we want to add a pillar of income. We want to save the money from that, add a second pillar, add a third pillar, so on and so forth. It's a circle that continuously goes month after month, year after year. And so what we're going to talk about today is adding our pillar of income. So there we go. Let's look at talking today about compound interest. We've all heard about it. Everyone's probably aware or heard of compound interest. What is it? What is compound interest? Compound interest is the interest calculated on the principal, the money you've saved, and the interest accumulated over the previous period. It's interest compounding on your principal as well as interest compounding on interest. Now, Warren Buffett refers to compound interest as the eighth wonder of the world. I've got a little note here, and it says, Warren Buffett explains the power of compound interest by comparing it to a snowball rolling down a hill, picking up more snow as it goes, and eventually it becomes a huge snowball. Buffett believes compound interest can create huge returns if approached with patience and the right strategy. I think that's very, very important. Patience. Wealth is patience. Wealth is having a plan and being patient. It's not doing a pump and dump into a crypto stock or some stock that you got a tip from your friends, brothers, mom. When we do things like that and we don't follow our plan, we tend to lose money. I had a friend of mine give me advice on a stock years ago. He said the stock's going to go, it's going to hit, it's going to go big, it's going to go big. I put $5,000 into it. The next day, that 5,000 was worth, I think, maybe half or $2,000. I think it's worth around there today. So that was gambling. That was not investing. So what I want to talk today about is how we can establish a plan, put a plan in place, a consistent plan to generate wealth and amass a great fortune over time. Now, let's look at this. I want you to do a couple of things. One, I want you to pull out a piece of paper and I want you to write down what is the value of your home today. So write down what is the value of your home today. If you had to sell your home today, what would you sell it for? What's the value? Go ahead and write that down. And then what I want you to do is write down how much would you feel comfortable investing today. If I told you, or somebody told you, you have to invest money today, how much would you be comfortable parting with and being able to invest into an account today? $500, $5,000, $50,000, whatever the number is. What would you feel comfortable getting rid of today and putting it into an investment that you're not going to touch for a long period of time? And then what I want you to write down is how much do you feel you could consistently invest on a monthly basis? What do you feel every month you could consistently invest without really feeling the financial burden of it? $10 a month, $100 a month, $1,000 a month, $10,000 a month, whatever that number is, write it down. And again, this is just an exercise for you. I'm not going to ask you to share. So just write down what is the value of your home today if you're a homeowner. If you're not a homeowner and you're a renter, just put 0. Or maybe you have investment property, but just write down for conversation's sake, value of your home, how much would you feel comfortable investing today? And then how much could you consistently invest on a monthly basis without really feeling the financial burden of it? Now that we have those numbers, I want to dive into a couple of things, and I want to talk about utilizing a compound interest calculator. So compound interest calculator, these are cool. Investor.gov is one that I like to use. There's tons of them out there, but compound interest calculator, investor.gov, go to the financial tools and utilize a compound interest calculator. Leo, I forgot to mention too, if you missed the first session, Leo, if you wouldn't mind dropping a recording in the comments for the first section. Also the net worth tracker, Leo, if you'll drop that link in the comments as well. Take a look at that session and go through that net worth tracker and fill that out as complete as you can. I think it's going to be super helpful. So if you missed last week, jump on the recording. Leo just tracked the net worth, and then he'll put the training in there as well. So thank you for that. Let's look at compound interest calculator. Now, here's what I want you to think about. I want you to, one, write down the number of how much cash would you have to invest today. And this is just saying that we invested money one time. If we just invested a lump sum of cash today and let it sit for 30 years, right? And then we had an 11% interest rate. Compounded frequency is daily. We're going to calculate this. How much do you think that would be? So if I had $10,000 that I invested today, and let's go here, and let's go to our calculator. And so this is investor.gov under the financial tools, but I'm going to take $10,000 and I'm going to say I'm not going to put any additional money into my $10,000. And I'm going to let this money compound for the next 30 years. And I'm going to say that I'm going to earn an 11% annual return year after year, every year on average for the next 30 years. Now, I'm not going to put 0 on my frequency range. I'm not looking for it to vary. I'm just going to say that's my safe. And I want it to compound daily. So compound frequency is important. Compound frequency. So this is the number of times per year your interest will be compounded. Now, on things like your stocks and index funds and mutual funds and IRAs and that, it compounds daily. On things like your home, we're going to utilize this calculator as well to look at the compound effect on our personal homes as well as investment properties. and look at appreciation on those properties, that's compounding annually. But for the sake of this conversation, let's say I put my money here, my $10,000 into a brokerage account, and I bought an index fund with it, bought index funds, or shares in an index fund. And I just did it one time. I did it today for $10,000. I put $10,000 in. I'm going to let it sit for 30 years, compounding at an annual interest rate of 11%, compounded daily. How much money do you think that is in 30 years? My $10,000 invested one time for the next 30 years. What do you guys think? Drop it in the comments if you're able to. How much do you think it is? 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand, $1 million? Drop it in the comments. Let me know what you think. Let's see if we get anybody dropping stuff in here. So, okay, there's one, 75,000, 80. Okay, yeah, let's take a look then. All right, let's look here. I'm going to calculate $270,000. So my $10,000 invested one time, compounded over 30 years at 11% interest rate, gives me in 30 years $270,000. Now, something I want you to think about. It's said that something like 97% of people at the age of 65 don't have $600 for an emergency. They don't have $600 that they can access, and that means if somebody needed tires, they need to go finance their tires. If somebody has a medical emergency, it's getting financed, or whatever the case may be. Now, when you look at something as simple as this and saving could we all save $10,000 this year if we needed to? Could we all do it? Probably. Probably. Most of the people on this call could find a way to save $10,000 and put it away and not miss it. Maybe it takes 2 years to do it, and that's okay. But could you save $10,000 if you became really financially aware around your spending? And could you save it? Now, $270,000 in 30 years obviously is probably not going to be enough to retire on, and it gets you out of falling into that trap of being one of the 97% of people that don't have $600, right? They've worked 30 years of their life and they have nothing to show for it. Something as simple as this strategy gives you $270,000. Now, what if I dropped 100 grand in there? Well, my math looks totally different. $2.7 million I would have in 30 years. So let's talk a little bit more about this and what we're thinking. Here's another cool thing I like to look at is, well, for one, Warren Buffett, let me talk about this real quick. Warren Buffett said, this was 5 or 6 years ago at an annual shareholder meeting for Berkshire Hathaway. Warren Buffett said that had he invested when he was 16 years old, so when Warren Buffett was 16 years old, had he invested $10,000 into an index fund and let it accrue until, this was 4 or 5 years ago, I think he's like 94 now, so he would have been 89, 73 years, something like that, I can't remember. But he said, if he invested that when he was 16, at the age of 16, $10,000, how much do you think that money would have been 4 or 5 years ago for Warren? So it's accruing like 70 plus years. All right. He said it was going to be $51 million. $51 million is what that amount of money would have been had he invested $10,000 when he was 16 years old and let it grow. And so time is the thing that really separates us when it comes to making money. So time. Let's look at this. Compound interest is the reward for patience and long-term thinking. It's our impatience that causes us problems. We think we have to get ahead faster, and so we risk an inordinate amount, and we have ups and downs, and the downs can affect us greatly. Who has ever bought a stock bought a stock based on a tip from a friend that probably didn't know what they were doing? Who bought AMC stock when that was on its, like, it was rolling up and down really high? Who bought Bitcoin and Dogecoin and SHIB and all of these other things based on the excitement that, wow, if this thing hits, I'm going to get wealthy quick? A lot of us tend to do that. And we tend to do that when we don't really have a disciplined plan in place. And so when we don't have a disciplined plan in place, we become more cavalier with our money, And we feel that, well, if I just invest this $5,000 or $10,000 and it does hit, it could be $200,000 in 6 months. We get excited about that. What typically happens though is that $10,000, not always, but most of the time, it turns into half the amount, or it turns into $1,000. You lose all your money. Things like that happen. So what we need to be looking at here is, let's go back. How do we establish a plan right now? So let's talk a little bit about, from an investment strategy, what we do. For one, again, we have to go and create income. But where am I getting this 11% estimated interest rate? Because maybe your financial advisor tells you, hey, we're shooting for 7%, right? They're putting you in mutual funds, things of that nature. We're shooting for a conservative 7%. Well, let's go look at this real quick. I'm a big believer in investing in index funds. I think if you have a financial advisor, there's a couple of things I would be talking to your financial advisor about. And this is not, I think there are some excellent financial advisors out there. I also think that every industry has excellent people, it has marginal people, and it has below marginal people in it. Take the real estate industry, for example. There are excellent realtors, there are realtors that are okay, and there are realtors that don't care and only care about their commission and don't serve their clients. That is every industry. It's not just the real estate industry. So when choosing a financial advisor, I would be asking some questions. I would be asking, what's their investment strategy? Are they putting you into mutual funds that have high expense ratios? What is their fee? A lot of people can't tell me don't know what the fee is that their financial advisor takes on their money every year. They have a fee to manage your money. What is it? 0.5%, 1%, 2%? That's cutting into the return on your investment. So what I like to do, and again, this is just what I like to do. This is not saying what I'm doing is correct. It's not saying what I'm doing is the end all be all. This is what you should be doing. This is just a strategy that I've employed many years ago that works really well for me. I invest a lot of my money, the money that I invest into the market, into an S&P 500 index fund. I like two of them. I like Schwab's here, which is SWPPX, and then also Vanguard, which is VOO. Now, when I look at Charles Schwab, and I've got, let me shift back to my tab, excuse me. Okay, there we go. When I look at the Charles Schwab S&P 500 index, which is SWPPX, that's the ticker, today it would cost me $89.82 to buy a share of this index fund. Now, when I get into this, I can look and see that my year-to-date return on this investment or on this fund is 22.87%. That's really good. All right, it's beating the 7% that an advisor might tell you. The 5-year return over the last 5 years, the annual return or the average return on this has been 15.87%. Pretty good in my opinion. Let's look now. If I go to, go here real quick. Let's look at the 10-year. So right here, 10-year. The 10-year return on an index fund for this index fund is 13.32%. Now, that means on average, this fund has returned an average each year of 13.32%. Now, that's not to say that it returns that every year. And as you can see here, look here, last year, or so far 2024, 10.5 quarter. These are the quarters as well. This is a quarterly return. Scroll over here, but you can see some red here. So there are some losses in these years. So they're definitely, look right here, 2022, it lost 18.13%. 2021, it was up. 2020, up. 2018, up. I'm sure 2008, it was down. Yes, 36% down. Look at all these years. So it's not to say that you cannot lose money in this strategy. But here's the key to this though. When I invest my money in an index fund, I'm putting it in there and I'm letting it go. I'm letting it go to work for me. I'm not worried about the market. I'm not worried about a down market. I continue to buy in down markets because I know over the life of the S&P 500, if you look at the S&P 500 from its creation, which was 1957, I think, it's returned about 10.5% annually. So I know that even if there's a down year like 2022 and I'm losing money, I don't get scared and pull my money out. I keep my money in because the next year I might have a bigger year and I might generate more of a return. And what I know is that with this strategy over the last 10 years, my money has grown by on average 13.32%. So What I like about an index fund strategy, and again, I cite Warren Buffett a lot because I feel like he's a very logical investor. He's a guy that's allowed time to be his friend when creating wealth. He's not somebody that's get rich. He's more of a get rich for certain, not a get rich quick, more of a get rich for certain. And if you think about it, like he didn't really start to make the bulk of his money until he was in his 50s. And if you track, I don't have it pulled up, but if you track his net worth, a lot of it started to really grow in his 50s. But with this strategy, I don't have to worry about a stock tanking. I don't have to worry about I don't have to worry about worry. Let me have a comment here. For a beginner investor, would you say recommend ETFs over blue chips? Yeah, I wouldn't invest in any of it, Leo. I would be doing index fund. I would put it in this index fund because with stocks, I have to worry about, the CEO goes on the news and does something incredibly stupid and the price tanks, right? I'm constantly worried about that. Where with my index fund method, I just let the market, this is investing into the S&P 500. And I know over time, this tends to perform very well. Buffett also did a thing where he had a bet with a hedge fund manager that he said over a 10-year period, the S&P would beat the hedge fund's returns. And after like year 9, I think the S&P was dominating the hedge fund. So that tells us two things. When we invest in stocks, a lot of us don't know what we're doing. A lot of our financial advisors probably don't know what they're doing as well, as much as maybe they should be. There are some excellent, again, financial advisors out there, but keep in mind, getting into becoming your financial advisor could have been a gym and a personal trainer a year or two ago. You have to ask questions when you choose your financial advisor. It's very, very important. Just because they're a licensed financial advisor doesn't really mean they know what they're doing. Also, what I've seen a lot of financial advisors do as well is they'll push people into mutual funds that could have a higher expense ratio. So another reason I like an index fund, not only because it generates typically a very, very good return, but when I look at my expense ratio, this is very important. So when I look at the fund. Now, if I go to let's look at this other mutual fund. So this mutual fund, this is just one I pulled. It was one of the top performing mutual funds. And if I go here and I look at the expense ratio on this, it's 0.75%. That means every year I'm losing 0.75% to have my money in this fund. It's a higher expense ratio. You will see some mutual funds that have 1%, 1.2%, 1.34%, some even maybe a 1.5%. I haven't seen any at 2%, but you will see. But what that's saying though, is that's a fee basically you're paying, and that's an expense you're paying on having your money in this fund. So if I'm paying, let's just say 1% to have my money in a mutual fund, and I'm paying my financial advisor another 1%, well, I'm losing 2% of a return annually. And it might not sound like a lot, but it does make a difference. Let's go back to our, actually, let's go here to the performance on this mutual fund. So this is a top performing mutual fund right now, currently. And if I go to look at my 10-year. So right now, year to date, this mutual fund's at 34.73%. It's doing very, very well. It's crushing it. So it's having a great year to date. Over the last 10 years, it's performed on an average of 9.58%. So keep that number in mind. 10-year return on this mutual fund, 9.58%. I've got a 0.75% expense ratio. Let me go back to my index fund here, my Schwab 500. And if I go to the performance, what's my 10-year? 13.32%. So let's look at the difference there. If I go to my compound interest calculator on 100 grand and I put in 9.58% over the next 30 years, just say, and I compound it daily and I calculate, if I put 100,000, that gives me $1.7 million on a 9.58 in that mutual fund. Now, hang on a second. There we go. That gives me 1.7 million. If I go back and put my other Charles Schwab index fund, 13.32%. So keep in mind 1.7, let's call it 1.8 million. Let's put in 13.3 with my index fund. Where am I at now? Same number invested, same amount of time, different interest rate. we're looking at $5.4 million as opposed to call it 1.8. It's a massive difference, massive difference. Interest rate matters. Expense ratios matter. That 1% that you might be losing to be in a mutual fund every year matters. And so I challenge you. I'm not saying go fire your financial advisors, and there are excellent financial advisors out there. I'm just challenge you to go talk to them. Ask them, hey, the current setup you've got me in, what expenses am I paying? How much do I pay you on a yearly basis? Money. What are the fees I'm paying? The fees can add up, and they can drastically affect how much money you're making. So I hope this is making sense. And if we have questions, drop them in. Let me look over on anything on Facebook here, Leo. But drop them in the comments if you have comments and questions. But hopefully that's making sense. So this, again, is just a strategy I employ. I like to invest a lot into this Charles Schwab. Again, you can set a lot of this up yourself as well. You can. I have a Charles Schwab account. You can utilize that to set this up. And if you have questions on that, let me know. So very simple to set up, though. All right, let's go back here. Let's look now. So let's go back. Actually, let me do another thing. Let's look at the compound interest calculator again. Let's say you have a child, right? And every year they get birthday money and Christmas money, and then maybe they, I don't know, but they get maybe a Catholic, you get baptism money. Like, let's just say on average that kid gets $1,000 per year, right? Each year for the first 18 years of their life, and they get $1,000 because eventually when they're 14, 15, 16, whatever, they start working some, part-time jobs, and they start working. But on average, they could invest $1,000 a year, and one child puts that money in the just like in the bank, right, or in their mattress where it's not generating any interest. And so they would have, at the end of 18 years, they would have $18,000. Now, let's say another child invested their money, $18,000. So actually, wait a minute, we're going to say $1,000 a month, which is what, or excuse me, $1,000 a year. What is that, like $84 a month? Is that right? Yeah, 83 point. Let's just call it $84. $84 a month over an 18-year period, and let's just say they generated that return. They put it in the Charles Schwab index, compounded daily for the next 18 years. How much money do we think it would be? Child one, who just put it in the mattress or put it in the bank that wasn't really generating any interest, at $18,000. Child two invests their money monthly, $1,000 a year over an 18-year period. What do we think it's going to be? Any guesses? Anybody have any guesses on it? Child one's going to have 18 grand. Oh, thanks. I saw Angie's comment there, 270 there on that one from earlier. Thank you. Yeah. But child one, all right, let's look. Whoops. Zero, starting with zero, 84 a month. Child two in 18 years would have $75,000. $75,000. And Leo, can you make sure you grab the comments from Facebook and pull them over? Thanks. Child two would have $75,000 by employing a little bit of a different strategy. So rather than taking that money and spending it, which most of us did. I used to have I was a bus boy at like 14 years old at Bartolino's, and I'd make like $50 a night when I would work, and I would spend that money on CDs. Or it was like tape cassettes back then. Then CDs came around. So I didn't save any of it. What if I knew that maybe if I saved even $50 a month, what if I saved $50 a month of that money? What would that have done? But think about that. With our children right now, could we set our children up for success with simple things like helping them invest their money from an early age? I had an ex-girlfriend whose dad, when she would babysit when she was like in grade school and high school, her dad would take her money from her and he would invest it, and she would like cry. She would tell me the story. She would cry because he was taking her money and investing it. She ended up having like 40 grand when she was older. Like when we were in our 20s, when we dated back in the day, she had like $40,000 in her account just from her dad investing babysitting money. It's pretty cool. Right now, $40,000 is not life-changing, but when you're in your 20s, right? Like even now, an extra 40 grand would be fantastic, right? So be thinking about that. Can we help our children do that? So Angie, thank you for the comment. Kiplinger also has a great list of index funds you can research too. Yes, thank you. Check that out, everybody. So again, lots of great, I just gave two examples, Vanguard and Schwab. There are plenty of great index funds out there. things you want to look at their expense ratio, and then I would look at their returns. What are their annualized returns? Especially look over the last 10 years or so and see how they do. But again, a lot of this has to do with having a plan. Now, let's go on to our next slide here, and let's look at the value of our home. So we're going to use the compound interest calculator to find the value in our home. What is the value? So here's what I want you to think about. What's the value of our home and currently, and let's put that in there. So just make up a number. All right, I'm going to put the value of my home in here. I'm not going to put anything for a monthly contribution. Length of time, 30 years. I'm going to do a 4% interest rate, and I'm going to compound that annually. Now, why am I doing that? Because typically in Missouri, we see 3 to 4% appreciation. Now, keep in mind, if you're on the mentorship call last night, we talked around, we've experienced 60+% now appreciation prior to the pandemic in 2020. We had double-digit returns some of those years. Fantastic time to be a homeowner and pick up equity. But on average, 3 to 4%. We're seeing more 4%. Thanks for dropping that link in there too, the mentorship. So if you want to catch that from last night, go ahead and check it out. But 4% on average. Now, I'm going to compound this frequency annually, saying that my property will appreciate annually 4%. And then let's calculate it. Let's see what if I had a $500,000 home, what is that home going to be worth in 30 years? A $500K home will be worth $1.621 million in 30 years. 1.6. Let's say I had a $250,000 home and what it's worth today. Same calculation, that 250 home in 30 years will be 810. Say I had a 750 home, 2.4 million. So I want you to think about that. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of you might have a home right now with a low interest rate. Maybe you're at a 3% interest rate. Now, instead of selling your home when you go buy to the next one, what if you kept it? What if you kept that home and rented it out and continued to get appreciation while simultaneously now having a tenant pay down your mortgage? All right. So again, going back to the wealthy mindset, the difference between wealthy people and poor people sell things that go up in value. Wealthy people hang on to things that go up in value. So the key to getting wealthy is don't sell anything that goes up in value. If you keep it for a long enough period of time and you get compounding interest on that, through owning real estate, we're getting appreciation, all right? But we're generating that, we're building massive amounts of wealth. So be thinking about that too before you go sell your home. Now, some people might say, well, in order to buy the house I want, I have to sell this to get the equity out to buy, to put that down, the down payment for the next house. Totally understand. But I challenge you just to start thinking a little bit differently about it. If I need $200,000 to put 20% down on a house, and I need to sell my house in order to buy that, could I employ a strategy to generate an extra $200,000 over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever the case may be, put a plan together where I can go increase my income. Again, that's the beauty of our industry as realtors, is we can go make an infinite amount of money. We never get capped on the amount of money we make. So if I start thinking differently and saying, okay, if I wanted to buy $1 million home and I need to sell my house in order to put $200,000 down, I need to get the equity from that. Instead of that strategy, what if I kept my home, if I'm at a 3% interest rate or even whatever interest rate, what if I kept my home, found another way to go generate an additional $200,000 in income, put that as a down payment on my house, my next house, and I kept my house and bought the next house, right? So just be thinking differently about these things, especially when it comes to selling things that are considered assets. Now, earlier on, I mentioned the personal home is considered somewhat of a liability, but I could turn it into an asset by turning it into a rental property. So think about that. Now, let's look at one more strategy here. If I have investment property, let's say I bought an investment property and it's worth $200,000 today. All right, same strategy. I look in 30 years, what is that investment property worth? $648,000. So I take a $200,000 investment property, I keep it for 30 years. I have a 4% appreciation on that property yearly, and I have it now for 30 years. That property is going to be worth, call it $650,000. So if I have $650,000 on that property, what if I did that 5 more times? It's $3.2 million. What if I bought 5 investment properties, each worth $200,000? Now I have $3.2 million in 30 years. So the reason I bring this up is because a lot of it has to do with, I feel that when it comes to money, so many people just kind of put their hands up and say, I'm never going to have it. They make sense of never having it. I'm never going to have enough. The only way I'm ever going to be wealthy is because if I win the lottery. That is a wealth strategy for some people. It's a crazy one, but I mean, some people hit the lottery, right? Very small percentage of people, but I would not bank on the lottery as my wealth strategy. I had a grandpa that played the lottery well into, up until the day he died, and he didn't die with a whole lot of money. Had he saved the money he bought on lottery tickets every day, week, month, whatever it was, I don't know how often the lottery gets pulled, weekly or whatever. Had he invested that money, chances are he probably could have had a pretty substantial amount of money. So a lot of it has to do with time, patience. A lot of people just aren't patient. We don't think 30 years in advance. We're thinking for today. So step one is if we're thinking about today and how I'm going to get through the day, well, then we need to put all of our focus on increasing our income. We need to go out and make more money, sell more houses, and generate more income so we can get to a position then to be able to put a plan in place where now all of a sudden, okay, I'm generating enough. I'm caught up on my bills. I'm even. I'm good. I'm making money. I've got enough money coming in next month as well. And the next month, I'm getting a consistent flow of money coming in now. Now I need to start putting a plan in place to say, okay, what am I doing with this money now? Am I going to pay off debt? Am I going to, whatever the case may be? I will say this too, from a debt perspective, if you have interest rates over 6%, I'd probably pay those off pretty quick. High interest credit card debt, absolutely get that stuff paid off. Before you go investing money, I would be looking at getting those high interest credit cards paid off because debt will just financially crush you over time. So make sure you're paying off that debt. But be thinking about this now. What would my life look like if I put a strategy in place? So really write down right now, how much could you save right now if you needed to? How much on a monthly basis? Next week, we're going to dive into a little expense control, which we've done in the past. But if you're new here, you haven't seen it, we're going to go through a little more expense control. When it comes to wealth creation, I like to keep about 90 to 95% of my attention on creating wealth and about 5 to 10% on expense control. I like Dave Ramsey's got some excellent things for getting out of debt. But I find that, for me, I don't want to drive a piece of crap car my whole life. That's just me personally. For some people, it's totally fine. Right? I want a nice car. I want nice houses. I want nice trips. I want nice vacations. I want to have the financial means to go live a really, really abundant life. I don't want to be in scarcity mode my whole life. And so I look at it from majority of my focus, time, and attention as how do I go create more income? If I want something, how do I go get it? What do I need to go sell? What do I need to go do in order to make that money to go buy it? But next week, we're going to look at a little bit of an exercise on reducing expenses, especially the expenses that just creep up out of nowhere, and those reoccurring expenses definitely. So I hope this was helpful today in getting you to think a little bit about establishing a plan. But really, I want you to focus today on how much could you save right now? What would you feel comfortable with, even if it's $100 a month? I want you to look at this. If I started with zero today, and I said, okay, I'm going to save $100 a month. All right, over the next 30 years. We're going to put our Schwab index fund rate of return in there again. And I did that $100 a month for the next 30 years. That's going to give me $480,000, almost $500,000 I would have banked in 30 years on just $100 a month. Could we find $100 a month to save if we needed to? The answer is yes. Everybody in this call could do it. Even at my brokest point in time, when I had no money, I still found $100 to go out at night on a weekend because that was super important to me back then, right in my 20s. That was really important going out. I could have. My dad always preached and ingrained in me, pay yourself first. I use the excuse, I don't have any money to pay myself first. But I always found money to do the things that were important to me way back then, which was go out and party, right? I always found the money for that stuff. It was that this was not important to me back then. When this becomes important to you and the savings behind it, you find ways to start making it happen. And if you never read the book Richest Man in Babylon, go read it. It's a really cool book. But he talks about 2/10 of all you earn. Save 20% of everything you earn. So 20%. If you can get in the habit of saving and investing back into yourself from an investment standpoint here, 20% of your income, you will start to accrue a massive amount of money. If I got in the habit of saving $100 a month and it started to become very repetitive and very easy, And then I was like, you know what? What if I go and I can now save 150 a month? Right? What is the difference? We're at 480. Well, now I'm at 720. Yep. And look here, my initial contribution, my total contribution is $54,000. That's something I didn't highlight earlier. But look at that. If I saved $150 a month, that over 30 years, I'm physically saving $54,000 of my own money, but compound interest is generating the difference. It's giving me $720,000 when I only invested on a $54,000 investment. It's fantastic. Now, if I maxed up my IRA every year, we've talked in the past about Roth IRA. If I did my IRA every year, and that's $7,000 a month, which what's 7,000 divided by 12? 583, well, 584. If I maxed out my Roth IRA every year at $584 a month for 30 years, I have 2.8 million. So could you save 7,000? I think it's going up to 7,500 in 2025 too. But could you save $7,000 a year if you had to, and invest it, and let it sit and do it every year for the next 30 years? How much would you save? You would save $210,000 of your own money, and that would compound tax-free because it's a Roth IRA into $2.8 million. So my point with this is, does this seem, it's simple, not easy, right? That's the key to most things in life. It's simple, not easy. It's a very simple concept, but it's not always easy to be disciplined to put that money away, especially when unexpected bills come out and things of that nature. So I want you to think about that though. If you employed a strategy to start saving money, and even if it's super small, even if it's, I'm going to save $25 a month, you could cancel Netflix right now and save $25 a month, and $25 a month in 30 years will give you $120,000. Again, you are going to be way ahead of the bulk of the population that has nothing when they're 30 years from now. That is the bulk of our population, unfortunately, does nothing when they're 65, 70, 75 years old. They've worked their whole lives and they have nothing to show for it because they didn't have a plan in place to save that money. So even if you have to start small, it's fine. You can build on it. Everybody today, though, can start saving $25 a month. And what's cool is $25 a month doesn't seem like a lot, but over time, it can become a pretty big number. It's $9,000 invested over the next 30 years, and it turns into 120 grand for you. So hope this was helpful today. If you have questions, let me know. Next week, join us again next week. We're getting into some expense control stuff, and we'll keep this thing moving. So appreciate everybody being on. If you have questions, comments, drop them in. Leo, thanks for dropping the links in there. But appreciate you all. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.